The gospel text of today, taken from Mark chapter 8, verses 27 to 35, is made up of three parts. In the first part are the questions of who Jesus is for the disciples. The second is the first of the passion and resurrection predictions. And the third is about what it means to be a disciple of Jesus. Up to chapter 8, Jesus has been trying to communicate to his disciples in both word and action that he has come to this earth for a particular reason, namely to be God's representative of unconditional love. His disciples have understood, but very, very briefly and in a very small way, who Jesus is. And so, when they come to Caesarea Philippi, which was named after Julius Caesar and Herod Philip, who built that city, so under two political figures, under two considered great figures, Caesarea Philippi, it is deliberately in this great city, the externally great city, that Jesus asks his disciples two questions. And the first is, who do people say that the Son of Man is? The Son of Man referring to Jesus himself. And the people give these answers. First, that Jesus is John the Baptist. Second, that Jesus is Elijah. Third, that Jesus is one of the prophets. And these answers are inadequate. The reason why they are inadequate is because John the Baptist was a precursor, the one who said very clearly that he would go before the Messiah. Elijah, according to the prophet Malachi, was the one who would come before God. And the prophet was one like Moses who would prepare the way for the Messiah. So all these answers are inadequate because they do not recognize Jesus as the Messiah. They recognize him as the one who goes before the Messiah. That is why the second question which Jesus asks is, who do you say that I am? The you is plural and asked to all the disciples. It is, however, Simon Peter who answers on behalf of the disciples when he says, you are the Messiah. You are the Christ. Christos is the Greek term. Messiah is the Hebrew term. Christ is the English term, or the anointed one. So Peter is simply saying to Jesus in the Gospel of Mark, you are the anointed one. However, it can mean a number of things. Because Christos would mean anointed one. Even kings were regarded as anointed ones. So it is not clear from Peter's answer what exactly he means. He simply says, you are the Messiah, you are the Christos, you are the Christ, you are the anointed one. Because Jesus knows that Peter's answer has to be nuanced. Because Jesus knows that Peter's answer has to be refined, he tells Peter and the others with him not to tell anyone about it. Because he knows. If they simply communicate that he is the Christ, people's minds will go to the conquering Messiah. The Messiah who will come on a horse. The Messiah who will overthrow those who are oppressors. The Messiah who will use violent means. That is why, after commanding them not to tell anyone, the second part of today's gospel reading is where Jesus tells them about the kind of Messiah he is going to be through the first passion and resurrection prediction. 8:31 is the first time in the Gospel of Mark in which Jesus would talk about his passion, about his rejection, about his death, but also about his rising. Jesus never in the Gospels talks about his death without in the same breath talking about his resurrection, which shows the confidence and the faith that he had in God. This is the Messiah he has come to be. And then at the end of this explanation, or at the end of this passion and resurrection prediction, Mark will add a phrase. He said this plainly. That means he said it openly. He said it without mincing words. He said it without ambiguity, because now this is what they can proclaim. This Messiah can be proclaimed to the whole world. And because we know that Peter had not really understood it and his answer had to be nuanced and refined, Peter objects to this kind of Messiah. And so we know that Jesus was right in commanding Peter and the disciples to silence, because Peter understood Jesus not as the Messiah who would suffer and die and rise again. And that's why the moment Jesus talks about his passion and death, Peter forbids him from doing so. Jesus, however, is focused on God, not on humans, and he tells Peter not to try to go in front of him and be the leader. He reminds Peter that Peter is actually a follower and asks Peter to come behind him. He tells Peter to come behind him and not to be like the tempter who tries to go before. And so Peter has to follow and not lead. As long as Jesus is there, Jesus will be the leader, and so Peter must come behind. Coming behind means both physically coming behind, but also changing his view of the kind of Messiah that he must be. And in the third part, Jesus explicates this view and invites anyone and everyone who wants to be a disciple. And though often we are taught that Jesus invites those who want to be disciples to first take up their cross, that is not so, because the text does not say take up your cross before doing something else, which is denying the self. After Jesus talks about his messiahship, after Jesus tells Peter to come behind him and be a disciple, he invites others also to be disciples, and this is the way he invites them. If anyone wants to be a disciple of mine, anyone is welcome to be a disciple without distinction. Let him or her deny themselves first. Denial of self means to count the self as nothing. Denial of self means to count the self as no one. And when one does that, then there is no cross. If there is no self, there is no cross. If there is no self, the cross is not heavy. And that is why Jesus, the master teacher that he was, would ask people to do what was necessary first, because then they would not feel the burden or the weight of the cross when the self was denied. In the second reading of today, James is inviting those who profess to be disciples to continue to take up that cross, but by denying themselves first. If I deny myself, then I realize that not only will the cross be light, but I will not even feel or think that I am carrying a cross. There are times in our lives when we want God to show God's power, especially when we are being persecuted, especially when things are not going the way we want them to go, especially when people are threatening us, especially when our lives are in danger. We want God to come down and show God's power, show these people who God is. But God does not work that way. Like Peter, we also tell God that that God should not be like this, that God must show violently that God is in control. But God does not work that way, as Jesus has shown. As a matter of fact, even when Jesus hung on the cross, he was being tempted by a variety of groups, by those who passed by the religious leaders, by those who were crucified with him, to show that power. And it would have been a tremendous temptation. But this kind of power works only for a brief moment. This kind of sign is enough only for a few moments, and then another sign and another sign and another sign is required, and the signs never cease. All the signs that we will ever need of who our God is and continues to be have been given in Jesus. We've only to look at the cross and believe in the resurrection to know that no matter how challenging life is now, we will overcome. Will you stop believing in a conquering Messiah? Will you believe instead in a Messiah who suffers, who dies, but who rises again?